In the valley, where the river halves the village like a slow seam, people once called one another by name and shared bread on warm porches. Over seasons of unmet promises, shame, and small betrayals, the calls thinned. Doors closed earlier. Children's laughter grew cautious. The river flowed on, indifferent, while the villagers drifted into separate, brittle rhythms. Shadows pooled in thresholds. The market's clamor gave way to polite distance. At the center of the square sat Elara. She earned her name Quiet Weaver not because she never spoke, but because she spoke only when others could not bear their silence alone. Her loom was simple, a low frame of weathered wood, a stool that fit her small form, and a basket of threads in every hand-measured hue. People said she could weave winter light into cloth and make mended collars look whole. What they did not say was why they came: to leave pieces of themselves in a place where someone might hold them without judgment. It began with a slip of denim and a pocket still faint with the boy's shape. A father placed it in Elara's lap and, for the first time in years, told of the river night that had split him from his son. His voice was low and granular, as if the words had been worn thin by years of swallowing. Elara took the scrap, smoothed it, and threaded it into the loom with slow, exact fingers. She did not correct or console. She only wove, and the denim sat beside a frayed ribbon from a wedding long past. People followed the rumor like migratory birds. A teacher who had kept silent in council meetings left a pencil roll and admitted she feared being laughed out of her profession. A mother, exhausted and shamed by debt, slid a faded apron patch across Elara's palm and named the nights she could not stop crying. An old man brought a moth-eaten handkerchief and, in a voice that surprised even himself, asked for help tying his shoes. Each offering felt embarrassingly small, an emblem of a wound the giver had assumed was private, but Elara treated every thread as if it were a map. The loom changed the weight of what was given. Threads that had been edged with anger or humiliation softened when placed next to other people's fragments. The denim became a stripe of shared regret beside the wedding ribbon. The pencil roll threaded with a farmer's grain sack patch. The handkerchief knotted near a child's toy ribbon. The cloth did not heal the past. It rearranged it so the past could be seen as part of a pattern instead of a knife. People began to glimpse how their separate shames intersected. Neighbors, once too proud to meet eyes, began to pause at doorways. They asked about small things, how the harvest had gone, if the mill's wheel needed oil, and their questions were honest. A mother returned an apron patch to another woman over tea. A boy who had stopped speaking to his sister placed a tiny ribbon on Elara's stool and went home to apologize. Listening, practiced in public, loosened the habit of hiding. The transformation was not linear. Old hurts surfaced with new intensity. A feud between two shopkeepers flared when accusations unleashed memories of betrayals neither had intended. For a while, the square hummed with reopened wounds. Elara's loom absorbed them without erasing the pain. The cloth grew darker in places, thicker in others, bearing stains that would not come out. But the stains were visible now, and in being seen they changed from secret burdens into shared facts. Crisis arrived as crises often do, abrupt and clarifying. A violent storm clawed away the hillside path to the eastern fields, cutting off several families from work and water. The villagers, who had lately begun to greet one another without flinching, answered the call to help. Hands that had learned to place tokens into Elara's basket learned quickly to pass sandbags, to braid ropes, to carry frightened goats. They worked by memory. The slow, patient attention learned at the loom translated into careful coordination in the mud. When the sun lowered and the road lay patched by sweat and shared bread, people drifted to the square. Under lamplight, Elara's tapestry lay over the loom like a map of the village's interior life. It was not pretty in the way fine things are pretty. It was honest. Thread met thread in mismatched stitches. Freckles of oil and tears dotted the cloth, and colors that had once clashed now wrote a complex pattern. Those who had given scraps touched the places where their tokens lived and saw them transformed. The fabric didn't pretend pain hadn't happened. It told a truer story. Pain beside care, embarrassment beside generosity, grief beside small hilarities of human error. The act of being heard had made room for being seen and being helped. Elara never stood before the crowd to claim victory. When asked what had changed, she simply touched the basket and said, "People brought what they couldn't keep alone." Her answer became a rule of thumb. You do not have to fix everything you hear. sometimes holding it long enough with. Steady attention is what makes repair possible. Word of the square spread. Travelers paused to watch the quiet ritual. A visiting teacher sketched the loom and took notes about public listening. A weaver from the next valley apprenticed with Elara for a season. The village named a bench in the square for her, but the real change was less a monument than a custom. Neighbors learned to hand over a scrap of worry, to sit with someone who could not yet speak the whole story, and to return later with a small gift or a question that mattered. Years later, the tapestry hung in the schoolhouse, a classroom for new citizens, and a reminder for elders. Children learned to sew their fear into cloth, and to ask one another over spools and needles, "What would you leave me if your throat were full?" The question itself became a kind of kindness. The quiet weaver's gift was not magic, but method, patience, constancy, and the idea that listening is a craft you practice in public. The village remained imperfect. Old resentments surfaced sometimes and new ones formed. But the habit of exchange, of leaving fragments and watching others hold them, reshaped the communal imagination. In learning to be heard, people learned to hear. In learning to hold one another's frayed edges, they discovered how to stitch a life that could bear the weight of memory and hope together. Elara kept weaving until her hands needed rest. The loom outlasted her fingers, and the square kept its bench. The tapestry frayed in places, was patched, hung differently through seasons, and inspired other squares beyond the river. The final lesson the village kept repeating was simple and stubborn. When we teach one another how to listen, we give each other the possibility of coming home.